day, I was on a plane back home with my husband Christopher. During the flight, the plane encountered severe turbulence and ultimately crashed. We both unfortunately lost our lives. When we woke up again, we were back on the night of our graduation ceremony. At that moment, I realized he had never been able to let go of that person. In this life, I decided not to force it anymore and let him be. I took off my wedding dress, decided not to follow him anymore, and after completely breaking up with him, we never contacted each other again. 7 years later, he became a well-known painter in the city and publicly revealed his relationship with Jessica at an art exhibition. Seeing me alone, Christopher couldn't help but tease me. "I know you love me very much, but you don't have to be so persistent, coming all the way here." At that moment, my daughter ran over and took my hand. Christopher looked surprised and furrowed his brows, questioning, "Didn't you say you only loved me? Whose child is this?" The next time I saw Christopher was at his art exhibition. Actually, I wasn't very interested in the exhibition, but my husband insisted on giving me a painting as a gift and made me come to choose one first. I casually wore a comfortable cotton coat, didn't even put on makeup, and went straight to the art exhibition. I didn't expect this art exhibition was actually organized by Christopher. He's standing in the middle of the crowd, hugging Isabella. A group of people is surrounding him, constantly flattering him, including some of his former classmates. They're saying all kinds of insincere compliments, like how impressive Christopher is for holding an art exhibition just a few years after graduation. Good thing you didn't choose Emily back then, otherwise, he wouldn't have achieved this success now. I heard them talking about me, paused for a moment, but didn't pay attention and continued to look at the paintings to pass the time. The largest portrait in front of me was covered with gauze. At that moment, a gust of wind blew, lifting a corner of the gauze and revealing the chin of the person in the painting. This chin looks somewhat familiar, and at that moment, Christopher said to everyone, "I achieved today's success because I chose Isabella. As for Emily, she was just an ordinary one among many suitors, so there's no need to say more." Everyone started praising again, saying that Isabella gave Christopher 500,000 right off the bat, allowing him to focus on painting. If he had chosen Emily, a genius like Christopher might have been bogged down by life's trivialities. I heard Christopher and Isabella are getting married soon. Right, don't forget to invite us brothers to the wedding banquet. Christopher took Isabella's hand and said, "Yes, we have decided to get married on the 14th of next month. We will definitely invite everyone to come." A cheer erupted from the crowd. At this moment, someone interjected and asked, "Hey, Christopher, are you still in touch with Emily? I heard you put a lot of effort into painting a large portrait of her back in college." Christopher's expression became somewhat complicated. He fell silent for a moment, hiding his inner emotions with a smile. How could that be? It was her who pursued me back in college. At the graduation ceremony, I rejected her proposal, and since then we haven't been in contact for 7 years. I can't even remember what she looks like. Isabella, who was beside him, interjected, "Oh, come on. Christopher and I are about to get married. Why are you still bringing up that woman?" Christopher turned to look at Isabella, his eyes filled with deep affection. In the previous life, he and Isabella were the envy of everyone at school. He painted countless portraits of her to win her over. He said, "As soon as I close my eyes, I can picture your face. I painted 100 portraits of you. Your image will forever remain in my heart." I was moved by his deep affection and decided to be with him. At the graduation ceremony, I wore a wedding dress and brought him endless romance. But after getting married, I realized I was wrong. He couldn't forget Isabella. To save her, he boarded that doomed plane without hesitation, completely disregarding my safety. In the end, we both perished in that plane crash. After being reborn, I decided to leave him, but he went around saying that I was the one chasing after him. I only wanted to quietly wait for my husband and didn't want to get involved in these rumors. But I was still recognized. He pointed at me and shouted to everyone, "Look, isn't this Emily?" Everyone looked over at me and saw me standing alone in the corner, dressed simply, out of place among those in suits. They saw my attire and my solitary stance and began to make sarcastic remarks. I ignored them, standing straight and maintaining my dignity. Christopher saw me and waved, signaling for me to come over. I smiled and politely declined. Everyone approached me, scrutinizing me with mocking looks in their eyes. They are all discussing and speculating why I am here. Some say, "I think Emily is very persistent about Christopher and has been following him, so of course she would come to today's art exhibition." Seeing her dressed like this, She must be short on money and wants to ask Christopher for some. Christopher walked over and said to me, "Emily, I know you've always liked me, but you really don't need to keep following me like this. It's been 7 years. You should let go. It's time to forget about me." I hadn't even had a chance to speak when Isabella looked at me with obvious impatience. People say Christopher has many admirers, and today I finally witnessed it. Her tone gradually became sharp, and her voice increased in volume. "Hey, this art exhibition is not suitable for you. It's the highest level exhibition in the city, attended by high society. Don't lower the standards." Hearing her hurtful words, I struggled to suppress my anger. People around were also pretending to be sophisticated. Someone said, "Yes, I heard that the richest tycoon in our city is also coming, but he is usually elusive and hard to see, so this is a rare opportunity." Christopher acted like a good person in front of me, gently saying, "Emily, if you encounter any difficulties, just let me know. How much do you need? I can give it to you. But please don't cause any trouble at my art exhibition, okay? It's really ridiculous. I just came to take a casual look, but it sounds like I'm begging from his words." I maintained a polite smile, preserving my dignity. There's really no need for me to say much to these people. Isabella looked at me with a slight sneer at the corner of her mouth. "Stop bothering Christopher. He is now a famous painter and is getting married to me next month. You're dressed so casually and don't even bother to dress up. How can you attract others like this? I happen to have a few clothes I don't wear anymore. I can bring them to you later." As soon as those words were spoken, everyone around burst into laughter. Isabella was wearing a beautiful long dress, carrying an LV bag, and her hair was styled in wavy curls. Just to achieve this look, it must have cost quite a bit of money. I had just come out from home without even washing my hair, thinking this was just an ordinary art exhibition, like casually shopping at a market where I could pick a few paintings to buy. I didn't put much effort into my appearance either, wearing a cotton coat at home, which really pales in comparison to her exquisite long dress. "Don't mention it. You should keep it for yourself." I responded politely to her, but she wouldn't let it go and continued, "Don't be shy. You went all the way to the art exhibition to chase after Christopher, and I didn't see you feeling embarrassed then. Now, when I send you a few pieces of clothing, why are you suddenly acting bashful?" Everyone burst into laughter again, seeing them laugh so heartily. Even though I usually maintain my composure, I couldn't help but feel my face change a bit. He stopped smiling and looked at these people with a somewhat serious expression. At that moment, Christopher quickly walked up to me and handed me a card. He said, "There's a few tens of thousands in here. Take it and buy yourself some clothes. The password is my birthday. You should still remember it, right? Take the money and go quickly. Don't embarrass me in front of those important people." 7 years ago, I left him at the graduation ceremony, and since then, I completely forgot about him, not even recalling his birthday. He suddenly leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "I know you once loved me very much, but that's in the past. Don't let it affect the present. I have my own life, and you should pursue your own happiness." I looked up at him, with his naive and slightly foolish expression. Thinking back to my past life, I took off my school uniform at the graduation ceremony, changed into a wedding dress, and walked into the hall of marriage with him. He always worked hard to pursue his dream of becoming a painter, but he constantly faced setbacks, and no one wanted to buy his paintings. I stayed by his side, supporting his dream with the money I earned from writing novels. As time went on, he spent all day at home doing nothing, never earning money himself, just fantasizing about becoming a great painter one day. He spent all the savings I had set aside for childbirth. Later, he asked me to buy a very expensive paint, and I told him I had no money and refused. As a result, he became furious and hit me. He even smugly said to me, "Do you know, if I had married Isabella back then, I wouldn't have to live this hard life with you now. It's you who ruined my dream of becoming a painter." He gave up painting and stayed home drinking every day. He gave up painting and stays at home drinking every day. Because of his change, I secretly cried in the middle of the night. The vibrant artist from before is now completely gone. He blames all the problems on me pressuring him to get married. He says every artist is weighed down by marriage. If it weren't for you, I would have become a famous painter long ago. We've been married for several years, and he not only refuses to have children with me, but he won't even touch me. Later, he drove to find Isabella, and while speeding on the highway, he collided head-on with a large truck, and death came just like that. But in the face of death, I wasn't scared at all. Instead, I felt particularly relaxed. At that moment, I was finally free from his pressure and accusations. After that, we both started our own lives again. I no longer cared about him, and he didn't come to inquire about me anymore. We took completely different paths, with no debts to each other and no disturbances. He handed me his bank card, and I gently pushed it away, looking into his eyes and saying, "Thank you, but I don't accept things from strangers." Christopher's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at me. "Emily, what are you saying? Who doesn't know that you chased after me throughout college?" I couldn't help but retort, "Don't joke around during college. You secretly drew my portrait every day and said you'd never forget my face for the rest of your life." Christopher's face turned bright red, and he pointed at me, shouting, "Emily, stop talking nonsense. You're just a follower by my side. All of this is just your imagination. If you say I draw a picture every day, where's the evidence? Since I decided to leave Christopher, I've thrown away everything related to him, including the paintings he gave me. All burned to ashes." Isabella said from the side, "Stop talking nonsense. With you like this, how could Christopher ever notice you? Don't make baseless accusations without evidence." Okay, everyone nearby nodded in agreement. If we're talking about looks, I'm definitely not worse than Isabella. It's just that the clothes I'm wearing today are affecting my image, which makes Isabella look more outstanding. While everyone was still discussing, suddenly someone walked up to me and shamelessly started to touch me. He said, "You look pretty good as long as you serve me well today. I won't treat you poorly. People like you, who have no boundaries, will only be used by others." I shook off his hand and glared at him angrily. After I rejected him, he got a bit angry and charged at me. Fortunately, Christopher shouted at him just in time. "Stop! The richest person in the city is coming soon. Let's show him what we're made of." The man finally reluctantly let go, his gaze towards me filled with a hint of mockery. He continued, saying that the painting this tycoon wants to buy is also a piece I have poured my heart into for many years. It's the largest painting here. He pointed to the painting covered with gauze, his gaze towards me filled with complex emotions. Isabella said, "The tycoon is almost here. Everyone be quiet and don't embarrass us." Everyone immediately stood up straight, waiting for the tycoon to appear. At that moment, a little girl bounced in, followed by 3 bodyguards. People whispered among themselves. Just by her demeanor, it was clear she was the daughter of the richest man. Exactly, and she has 3 bodyguards with her. Who else but the tycoon could have such a setup? As soon as the little girl saw me, she immediately ran over joyfully. She stretched out her arms and shouted, "Mommy, hug me." I embraced her and chatted with my daughter for a bit. People around us were astonished by the scene, their mouths agape, eyes wide open, their expressions complex and varied. Isabella was particularly surprised, her eyes wide open, stuttering as she spoke, "Is this your daughter?" I replied unhappily, "Did you not see? Did you not hear her call me Mom?" Isabella had just been arrogant towards me, but now she was like a deflated balloon, losing all her earlier bravado. Christopher, however, deliberately said in a mocking tone, "HMPH, this girl doesn't even know whose child she is. Could she really be the daughter of a billionaire?" Hearing him insult my daughter, I coldly stared at him, my eyes revealing a hint of chill, but my tone was exceptionally calm. "Christopher, who did you just call a bastard?" He thought I still loved him, believing that I could never marry anyone else in my life, let alone have children. But he didn't know that I had long since moved on from him. Who doesn't know that you once devoted yourself to me? Now, you somehow found a child to act in front of me. It's truly ridiculous. After Christopher finished speaking, everyone nodded in agreement. Someone said that with Emily looking like this, it would be hard to get married, let alone marry a billionaire. This child has an unknown background. She probably doesn't even know who her father is. Hearing them slander my daughter back and forth, I could no longer suppress the anger in my heart. Just as I was about to explode at them, a commanding voice resonated throughout the exhibition hall. "Who dares to call my daughter a bastard?" The person who arrived was none other than the richest man in the city, William. The bodyguards present immediately bent down and shouted in unison, "Welcome, Mr. Rich." Seeing the situation change, everyone quickly bent down to respectfully greet William. Even Isabella lowered her head, her previous arrogance completely gone. Christopher watched this in shock and pointed to my daughter in my arms, asking, "William, is this girl really your daughter?" William barely glanced at him and coldly replied, "Does my daughter still need to prove anything to you?" Christopher was already sweating, stammering as he pointed at me and asked, "That Emily, is she really your wife?" William's expression darkened, and he angrily asked, "Is it you who disrespected my wife?" As soon as he said this, everyone was so frightened that they bent down even lower. Christopher became even more scared, trembling as he asked, "So do you still want my painting?" William coldly said, "I came today to buy a painting as a gift for my wife, Emily." Christopher listened and glanced at me. William turned to Christopher, his face showing interest, saying he heard you painted a large portrait of my wife, and he wanted to take this opportunity to let Emily come and see it. Isabella looked up and said to William, "Our Christopher and Emily were college sweethearts, but they haven't seen each other in 7 years. Christopher has long forgotten what Emily looks like. How could he possibly paint her?" Everyone nodded in agreement, saying, "Yeah, Christopher hasn't seen Emily in person, so how could there be a portrait of her here?" "William, did you mishear something?" Everyone stared at Christopher, watching what he would do next. Christopher slowly walked to the painting covered by a cloth, reaching out to grab a corner of the fabric and gently pulling it back. The painting depicted my face, with exquisite brushwork and a unique style, every stroke filled with deep emotion. This painting captured my facial features vividly. Even the position of the mole on my chin was perfectly accurate. Everyone who saw the painting was moved by its beauty, momentarily stunned. They looked at the painting and then at me. They confirmed that the person in the painting was indeed me. Even the aura between my brows was portrayed strikingly similar. As I looked at this painting, I couldn't help but feel admiration. In recent years, Christopher's skills have greatly improved. When Isabella saw the painting, her expression changed from surprise to fear, and she loudly questioned Christopher. "Didn't you say Emily always obeyed you? Didn't you say you could no longer remember what she looked like? How come this painting looks so much like her?" Everyone thinks I'm trying to curry favor with Christopher, but only I know that it was Christopher who relentlessly pursued me, almost to the point of eternity. He used all his skills to capture my likeness, from simple sketches to exquisite oil paintings, almost painting one every day. My image was deeply etched in his heart long ago. On graduation day, I wore a wedding dress, and everyone mistakenly thought I was the one who pursued him. I took off the wedding dress, left him, and ultimately chose to forget him. What I didn't expect was that even after 7 years apart, he could still clearly remember what I looked like. Christopher lowered his head, remaining silent. He couldn't bear to meet Isabella's questioning gaze and felt guilty towards me. He didn't even dare to look up in front of everyone. He simply said to William, "The painting is right here. Do you want to buy it?" Before William could react, everyone couldn't help it anymore. "Christopher, how did you create this painting? And how did you make it look so much like her? Are you the one who can't forget Emily? After being apart for so long, you can still remember what she looks like." The people present are all shrewd and smooth. What they excel at is flattery. Now that they see the situation has changed, they immediately turn to me and start flattering. I had long noticed that Emily was different. No wonder she is the wife of the richest man. Indeed, if an ordinary person married a billionaire, they would have been wearing designer brands and jewelry, living a luxurious life. But Emily can maintain her original intention and live a simple and low-key life, which is truly not easy. I had no reaction to their flattering words. Their attempts to please only made me feel a bit uncomfortable. William stared at the painting and praised it repeatedly, saying it was truly amazing, with even the details of the skin depicted vividly. Hearing this compliment, a satisfied smile appeared on Christopher's face. He confidently said, "Of course, I've painted this piece countless times, and every detail is etched in my mind." As soon as he said this, there was an uproar in the room. Everyone then understood that the true infatuated person was actually Christopher. Someone said, "Christopher, I really didn't expect you to be the one who was infatuated. It turns out Emily was the one who proposed the breakup at that graduation ceremony. Now that you see Emily marrying someone else, don't you feel sad?" Christopher's face turned red upon hearing these words. He lowered his head and didn't know what to say for a moment. Isabella stood nearby, her face turning pale with anger. She never expected that the man she loved wholeheartedly had been thinking of someone else all along while she was kept in the dark. It's truly something that makes one both cry and laugh. Isabella couldn't help but laugh out loud, and everyone looked at her with puzzled expressions. William was completely indifferent to the emotional entanglements between these men and women. In his view, these were just child's play. He is a man with a cold exterior, but he is particularly gentle with me at home. No matter what I want, he buys it for me without hesitation. At this art exhibition, his gaze only lingered on this painting and my fondness for it. He asked me, Emily, do you like this painting? If I like it, I will buy it regardless of the price. I looked at the painting, which was painted by Christopher, and it represents his longing for me. I didn't want to have any more contact with Christopher, so I casually said I didn't like it. William seemed a bit surprised when I said I didn't like it, but he respected my decision. He said, all right, since there are no paintings you like here, we can leave. He grabbed my hand and pulled me towards the exit. Seeing this, Christopher immediately panicked and hurriedly shouted, William, I still have plenty of paintings here. Would you like to pick a few more to take back? William looked at me and asked for my opinion. I thought carefully and looked at the paintings around me, feeling that they were all quite ordinary. My portrait is the best painted one, I said. Then let's buy this portrait. Faced with my sudden change of heart, William didn't say much and directly asked Christopher for the price. Christopher held up 4 fingers and said, 400,000. He nervously waited for William's response, as 400,000 is not a small amount. Unexpectedly, William immediately said, 400,000, right? I thought it was more. I'll transfer it to you now. He made a phone call and instructed his secretary to transfer 400,000 to Christopher's account. In less than 5 minutes, the money was transferred. The bodyguards behind him immediately started moving the painting, and William turned to speak to me. This painting is quite a bargain. The necklace around your neck is worth $1 million. This painting will hang in your room, just right for that empty wall. To be clear, this painting is particularly large, almost the size of the living room, yet it only needs to occupy 1 wall in my room. Everyone present was a bit surprised, especially Isabella, who clearly showed her discontent on her face. But I waved my hand and told the bodyguards not to take it home. I didn't want to see it, so they could just dispose of it as they wished. At this statement, everyone in the room was stunned, including William. He asked in confusion, wasn't this painting your choice? Why do you want to get rid of it now? He wasn't concerned about wasting money. He was puzzled as to why I suddenly didn't want it anymore. This made me feel very secure, and it was also the reason I decided to be with him. I said that since breaking up with Christopher, I had completely forgotten him, and I didn't want to keep any of his things at home, nor did I want to hold onto my memories of him. This painting is indeed painted very realistically, so I had to buy it to prevent Christopher from seeing me again. I'm planning to burn it because I don't want to leave anything of Christopher's at home. After I finished speaking, Christopher was stunned. His eyes were blank, and he didn't know what to think. William waved his hand decisively and said, then let's burn it. After that, she took her daughter and left with her husband. This art exhibition was actually prepared by Christopher specifically for William, with the aim of selling a few paintings. She just didn't expect that the main character of the exhibition would actually be herself, and she never thought that the organizer would be him. After we went out, Christopher hurriedly caught up with me from behind. He had something to say to me. I told my husband to wait in the car first, and I stayed behind to face Christopher alone. He reached out to pull me aside. I coldly swatted his hand away, saying, don't touch me, I have nothing to do with you. He looked a bit dejected and said, then let's talk now. If you have something to say it quickly. My husband and child are still waiting for me. He still thinks that I've always loved him. Did you really marry William? And he even had a daughter. Does he not realize that this is so obvious that it doesn't even need to be asked? I frowned and crossed my arms. What do you really want to ask? Just go ahead and say it. We haven't been in touch since graduation. How did you end up with William? I could sense his reluctance, after all. It's hard to see an ex-girlfriend doing better than oneself. But there's nothing to hide. I simply shared the entire story of how I met and got to know William. After graduation, I broke up with Christopher and quickly moved on, focusing on my work and writing novels online. William was particularly fond of my novels and tipped me every day. At first, I didn't know he was the richest man in the city. Later, we interacted frequently, got to know each other better, and began meeting up. I admired his upbringing and way of speaking, and gradually we developed feelings for each other. Eventually, we naturally got married and had a daughter. Although my story with him is ordinary, it is very happy and unforgettable. Christopher's expression gradually darkened. He seemed somewhat reluctant and a bit unwilling to let go. He simply asked lightly, do you love him? I answered without hesitation, of course I do. Christopher suddenly seemed a bit anxious upon hearing this answer. He asked, didn't you say you only loved me? How could you love someone else? This really makes me a bit angry. How can this person be so unreasonable? Are you out of your mind? I was only 20 years old and still a young girl when I met you. Do you want to tie me to your side for the rest of my life now? Christopher slowly lowered his head. Let's not mention the past. There is no place for you in my life anymore. Weren't you getting married next month? I wish you happiness. Just as I was about to turn and leave, he suddenly grabbed my wrist, and the topic abruptly shifted to our past life. He said, if it weren't for you harming me in our previous life, we wouldn't have separated. His words left me confused. It was clearly he who couldn't let go of Isabella and caused the accident while driving me. What are you talking about? When did I ever harm you? He said, in the last life, you went to the Artist Association spreading rumors that my paintings were all plagiarized, ruining my chances of publishing my work. On the contrary, Isabella has always encouraged and supported me from behind. I have never harmed Christopher. He needed money, so I gave him money. He needed to buy paint, and I would rather not buy skincare products than to not buy him the best. But in the end, my efforts became something he took for granted, and he even treated me like a villain. Looking back at my past life, I was truly a naive and innocent little girl. In this life, my mindset is completely different. I no longer treat others kindly without thought, nor do I easily give for anyone. I told him, I have never harmed you. In our last life, we were together for 10 years, you didn't want children, and I completely understood and accepted you. But you believed the rumors and said I had framed you. If you can't even give me this little trust, then go pursue your happiness. After I finished speaking, I turned and walked away. Christopher still wanted to grab me, but I shook him off forcefully. The cold wind of February cut like a knife, creating an irreparable rift between him and me. I have completely let go of all the emotional entanglements from my previous life with him. Unexpectedly, just a month later, on the 14th, the day that was supposed to be Christopher's wedding day, he told me over the phone that he had broken up with Isabella, and the wedding was canceled. I didn't say anything on the phone, after all, to Christopher. I was just a stranger. What does it matter to me whether strangers break up or not? But Christopher doesn't quite understand my silence. He casually asks me, Emily, I've never been married, and my career is doing quite well now, although you are already married. I wouldn't mind if you wanted to come back to me, even if it's your second marriage. His words made me very uncomfortable. I have no feelings for him, and I certainly wouldn't marry him. It's ridiculous that he even looks down on me for being a second wife. I couldn't help but laugh at his arrogance and said to him, you need to understand. You are the one pursuing me, and I haven't agreed yet. Yet you're the one being picky. Christopher, on the other end of the phone, still persistently pleaded. Divorce. Be with me. I promise I won't treat you the way I did before. I coldly replied, you saw at the art exhibition how good William is to me. Why would I give up my position as the wife of a billionaire to go back to living a hard life with you? Do I have to spend money to help you buy paint for your art? You not even have this little money. Christopher wanted to say something else, but I didn't wait for him to speak and directly hung up the phone. I also blocked his number. I don't want him to disturb my life. A few days later, I saw the news about Isabella being arrested. It turns out her father has been secretly producing counterfeit and inferior products. Isabella's wealth to support Christopher comes entirely from her family's involvement in illegal business. After graduating, Isabella has been helping manage the family business at home. When something happened at home, she was also arrested because of it. Without Isabella's support, Christopher returned to his former life as a poor artist. He remains in a predicament where he can't sell his paintings and can't afford paint. To make a living, he had to take a job as a teacher in a tutoring center, spending all day teaching elementary school students. With this meager income, he barely manages to get by. Coincidentally, my daughter's interest class teacher is Christopher. He came to my house to check on my daughter in his capacity as a teacher. But as soon as he walked in, he hardly paid attention to my daughter and came directly to me, asking me various questions. Seeing me washing fruit, he even reached out to help and accidentally brushed against the back of my hand. I suppressed my discomfort and politely said to him, Christopher, first of all, thank you very much for coming to look after my daughter, but I also want to remind you to be mindful of boundaries. This is not a place for you to act casually. I glared at him, my eyes filled with dissatisfaction. He realized he was wrong, said nothing more, and quietly walked away. He turned to teach my daughter how to paint, saying, the thing I do best in this life is to paint your mother. Shall I teach you? My daughter usually loves me very much, and when she heard she could paint me, her eyes squinted with joy. I was in the living room, watching him teach my daughter how to paint in the study. It turns out he really didn't need to look at me to draw my likeness. After a while, my daughter excitedly walked up to me with the portrait she had drawn of me. She happily exclaimed, Mom, look, This is you that I painted." I looked at my daughter holding my portrait and smiled happily. I gently patted her little head. Unexpectedly, this simple gesture gave Christopher other ideas. He said, "Emily, I know you still love me, right? The smile you had when you saw this painting must mean you still love me." I immediately stopped smiling, told my daughter to go back to her room, and closed the door. She looked coldly at Christopher and seriously said to him, "I smiled because of my daughter. Can you please stop bothering me?" Christopher suddenly knelt beside her, looking aggrieved. "Emily, I know I was wrong. Can you give me another chance? I understand that you still love me. Can we start over?" His demeanor made me uncomfortable, so I pushed him away with all my strength, and he fell to the ground. "Go away. Don't make me feel upset. I've already forgotten you, so don't show up in front of me again." He crawled over on his knees, grabbed my hand, tears streaming down his face. "I know this is all my fault. Please forgive me this time, okay? Divorce William and be with me." I pulled my hand away. "Do you think you deserve that?" He still wouldn't let go, clinging to me until my husband William returned and stumbled upon this scene. He asked us curiously what had happened. I told him the whole story in detail. "Christopher hopes I will break up with you and be with him." William was furious after hearing this. He kicked Christopher to the ground, and Christopher fell down looking disheveled. William pointed at Christopher and warned him sternly, "Don't let me see you again, or I will definitely find someone to break your arm." My husband is the richest man in the city, with connections in both politics and business. Moreover, he always keeps his word. If his wife is harassed, it will definitely damage his reputation. If Christopher harasses me again, he will really find someone to break his hands and feet. Christopher was thrown out by his bodyguards. I also advised my husband that we live in a society governed by law, and if he gets caught, it will lead to a lot of trouble. My husband laughed and patted his chest, confidently saying that if he can't handle such a small matter, how can he establish himself in society in the future? I leaned against him. He said, "And never engage in illegal business. You know Isabella from the last art exhibition? He was just arrested for selling counterfeit goods." William gently stroked my hair and assured me, "Don't worry. All the projects we undertake have passed quality inspection. We won't use inferior materials or do anything illegal." Upon hearing this, I broke into a relieved smile. Later, I received news from Christopher. This time it was from his parents. "Emily, I understand you may not forgive Christopher, but what people say at the end of their lives often comes from the heart. Please go and see him one last time." Hearing this, I can't help but recall the events of my past life. In my previous life, I devoted myself entirely to Christopher, but he caused me to have an accident. Despite that, we truly loved each other once. In this life, upon hearing that he might not have long to live, I decided to see what happened. When I arrived at the hospital, I saw Christopher lying on the hospital bed, emaciated, with sunken cheeks and vacant eyes. His hair was almost all gone. Seeing me, there seemed to be a glimmer of light in his eyes as he tried to sit up. His mother held him down on the bed, not allowing him to get up. It turned out that after he left me last time, he returned home and was gloomy all day. He had been immersed in past sorrow, crying constantly, not eating, and unable to sleep well. He finally realized that the one who had been harming him all along was Isabella. She used various methods to try to win Christopher back to her side. In the end, she really succeeded. Things did not end well. After Christopher came to this realization, he felt immense regret and became ill from constantly thinking about it. He developed severe depression. He lies on the hospital bed with very little time left. I stand at the door of the ward, gazing at him for a long time, unable to take that step. From his gaze, I can tell that he truly regrets it. I also gave him a glance, indicating that I have already forgiven him. However, from now on, let's act like we don't know each other and not keep in touch. After saying that, I turned and walked away. The debts from the last life have been settled in this life. I have completely forgotten about the past. Now I wholeheartedly enjoy a happy life.